what Ediphi wants to do is provide a framework so that you can provide high level of input on what the cost drivers are of a project as early on as possible, so that you can make decisions as quickly as possible.
Based on the design or?
Based upon the objectives of the project. And that's what's missing is a lot of times customers start with a designer. And then what ends up happening is you have designs. They meet all of the utilization objectives. And then what happens? The cost comes in and it blows the budget out of the water.
Well, I'll say that from my experience in pre-construction, you're lucky if you recover 50% of your cost, right? And you aim to cover 50% of your cost one of two ways. One, you sign a pre-construction agreement, and it's like, that's just straight up passing the cost on to the owner, and you wind up going over budget on every one and eating costs there too, right? The other is like, I'm gonna freak on this thing and hope the job converts, and if it does, we're gonna throw that cost on the job. Again, the client's getting hit with that. Or you eat it out of your bottom line, and then you're going to find other ways to make up that cost that you lost as a large organization, builder.
Dustin, you mentioned something in a previous episode about this notion of cloud-based. So perhaps we could talk about some of the current estimating tools that are on the market and available, and how bad is it? Most general contractors then claim to have good cost or pricing databases. Do you think this is true? Do you agree?
No. No. And actually, I think if you talk to them, they realize their cost database is out of date, at least at like the unit cost level. And then, maybe their line items also need to be cleaned up.
So one just quick example of a tool to help on that. If you bring in a line item on our platform, you can right click on it and see what everyone else thought that was worth on their project within that context, and how many square feet and when was it and who did it. Right? It's that sort of crowdsourcing that Dustin was just talking about that become the tools that empower people to be better at making judgment calls.
Well, I mean, this brings on an important point. Like, why should you pay for Ediphi relative to some other tools? So one of the reasons is if you're a relationship-based contractor, you want to create more trust with your client, right? And so you want to be able to tell them all the ways, because you tell them what it costs many times across many different milestones of the design phase, but you also want to tell them why the cost changed.
Yeah.
And sometimes those are difficult stories to tell because you got issued a new set of drawings and you're like, okay, well, what's the variance between one another? I think we do a really good job of helping you tell that story of from your previous milestone to your next milestone.
Is the plan just to focus on estimating, or is it to expand into a wider suite?
So we want to become the pre-construction platform so that we are the source of truth for what a project costs at any given point in time, all the way until you sign a GMP.
All right, guys, so in this episode, we're going to dive into the world of pre-construction and why getting it right is crucial. We'll explore the current landscape and then zero in on estimating, looking at why today's tech tools don't quite hit the mark. So I will leave this question very broad and you guys can do what you want with it, but tell us about pre-construction.
Sure. So pre-construction, let's say the simple answer is that it's before construction, right? So it's a period of time. And really, the tools in it aren't meeting the mark because there are a lot of stakeholders that are involved in that prior to construction period of time. So estimating is just a part of it. It is our core, and I think that for any solution to be a pre-construction platform, estimating does need to be the core, cannot be missing. It has to be the center of with all the spokes off of it. But you need to get all stakeholders involved, right? And then the workflows that are involved in that as well are more than just estimating, right? It's procurement and buyout and scheduling and planning your own people, your workforce, like general conditions and general requirements. There's a lot to it. And they're all interconnected. But the current state with the incumbents is a lot of disparate systems that are with siloed data and disconnected. right? So I think that connecting those pieces, distilling sort of all the workflows down and connecting them all together is why we're here.
So to add on to Mike, I think when you say what is pre-construction, it's funny because you see a lot of diagrams that show design, then pre-construction, then construction. Those diagrams are wrong, okay? Absolutely wrong. They're wrong because design is part of pre-construction. It's that pre-construction is everything you're doing in order to get the project ready to take place. And design is part of that process. So Ediphi supports estimating along with some other things that you do in pre-construction, but there's a whole bunch of stuff and activities you do in order to make sure the project signs a contract and kickstarts and happens. So that's pre-construction in a nutshell. I think people misconstrue, and I think that diagram where it shows the phases is just like ridiculous. It's pretty funny.
Is it not actually? So why have we been doing it wrong? That we first spend money to design something, and then we give it to people who do the estimation, and then the client gets back the information how much the design will cost, and then they will do something with it.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's one answer on why everyone thinks you start with design and then you move into pre-con, then you go into construction. But it is the status quo. I mean, you probably need to start with some designs, but what you really do is, and this is where everyone misses it, is you actually start with someone has an idea for a project and they have an objective. And they need to find out answers about if this project can meet these objectives. And that can take place by, let's start with some designs and then get some costs, or let's talk to some contractors and see, can we build it for this price and it'll meet this performance, my desired performances.
Numbers tell the story.
Yeah. So I think all of the conversations that you have in pre-construction, not many of them realize that there are actual customer inputs that kickstart construction. Whether you want to build a hospital, it's going to have, this is like how much we can afford to build. These are the departments we want to support that we need to get it done. If you want to build schools, if you want to build a multifamily development, if you want to build something, it has objectives, and then those objectives need to be met. And they usually have some sort of cost constraints. So those inputs feed into pre-construction, which then kickstarts design and estimating and scheduling and thinking about scheduling and how this project is going to come together.
Mm-hmm. So how are you going to streamline this communication of data between, for example, designers and people who do the estimates?
What Ediphi wants to do is provide a framework so that you can provide high level of input on what the cost drivers are of a project as early on as possible, so that you can make decisions as quickly as possible.
Based on the design or?
Based upon the objectives of the project. And that's what's missing is a lot of times customers start with a designer. And then what ends up happening is you have designs. They meet all of the utilization objectives. And then what happens? The cost comes in and it blows the budget out of the water. And then you spend, and Mike talked about 30 months for a project in the previous episode, you spend more time in pre-construction working those designs to meet a budget than the actual entire construction project.
That's right.
So rather, we waste a lot of design effort because we don't understand what are the cost drivers. And that's honestly because design firms, architectural firms, aren't in tune with what it costs to build. And we want to give tools so that GCs can more easily participate early on.
Can you give an example of a tool? Like what?
Sure. So within Ediphi, these are things that can be done in other tools. It's just how laborious they are. But you can essentially take any project that you've done before and use that for an historical benchmark purpose later in order to show the client and advise the client of what we've been able to do based upon historical projects on a cost basis and what that actually ends up buying you. So the client can understand what are the potential options that they have. If you go down further, a lot of clients want to know, like, okay, what's the performance of this project going to be? We can help you do that sort of programmatic estimating without designs, but more of intent. And then once we've done that estimating, our estimates actually include a lot more information to give back to the design team and say, hey, stay in these guardrails. These are our assumptions that we've built our estimate on. Rather, most estimating software is really good at taking inputs, which is usually quantities from drawings, and just spitting out a cost. But it's not informing the design team of, all right, it's reactive instead of proactive. I would say would be the delta.
Designers will not like it. Or you will be limiting their.
I actually could like it. Well, let me put it to you this way, right? Like, because as a person that made everyone's day bad, like that's what I did.
And engineers will love it. Engineers will love it. Architects will hate it.
Okay.
Maybe not, right? Because here's the thing. Like, again, I'm the guy that gave the bad news all the time. Dustin just said it. They get a design. It lands on my desk. I price it, ruins everyone's day. I hated being the guy that delivered bad news, right? And then it's like, well, how do I add value? And you add value by, well, really what the problem is like I give the bad news and then it comes back around, they do a design revision. This is cyclical. It naturally is cyclical.
What percentage of designs do you think you gave bad news on?
Nearly all of them.
Right?
Nearly all of them.
I mean, that's a fundamental problem.
A fundamental problem. So like you have this flow, these iterations of design concepts and pricing, and it's really slow. And ultimately what happens is someone finally goes like, we just need to do it. And you don't get to the optimal you're after. Oftentimes with value engineering, you have less scope for the same price because of the time it took, and then things escalated. So what we're fundamentally trying to do is yes, those iterations exist. Can we spin those iterations faster? Can we make those cycles go faster? And can we get in with pricing sooner to meet those objectives cost-wise to pick the viable design concepts and focus efforts there instead of doing it the other way around? And some of the solutions we have, we treat estimates as connected parts, area sheets, rooms, like formulas, connected parts, so that if someone asks us, hey, what if you delete a floor of the building? It's not going to take me 2 weeks. I can do that in a click. Everything updates. Here's the answer if you delete a floor of the building. So that you can maybe shorten every single floor to add another floor to get more units and still go under max height.
Yeah. So you're talking about getting design done and having live cost of the design?
Like a co-pilot almost to the design?
My dream is design and estimating happen hand in hand. This whole idea of the model's going to spit out an estimate, like they have to be parallel.
That's very intuitive. That's how it should be, right?
Yeah.
It's not at all right.
It's not that way now. No. It's not that way now, but the reality is like you can't design every design concept and then estimate it. But you can estimate every design concept before you get design.
Mm-hmm.
You can estimate a whole lot faster than you can design right now. And if I get to see this from the venture community and see what the startups are looking at for sort of this AI design automation, it doesn't take into account costs. And a lot of people are starting actually at the trade level, which is easier to do, like the individual sort of scopes, and that's the detailing out of some of that stuff. But if design doesn't understand cost, then what's the point of doing the design if you don't know if you can afford it? And so them working more seamlessly together is really important, and that's how we're going to make these projects just more efficient in pre-construction. Like, spend less money in pre-construction. You can spend a lot of money in pre-con. You don't call it free-con for no reason. Someone's paying for it, though. Someone's paying for it. It's either hurting the GC's bottom line, which they're going to make up for some way. The client ultimately ends up paying for it. Either the cost is being escalated for the projects over time. All of these things are just costing the whole industry more.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any statistics, like numbers on like how much money is being wasted?
Well, I'll say that from my experience in pre-construction, you're lucky if you recover 50% of your cost, right? And you aim to cover 50% of your cost one of two ways. One, you sign a pre-construction agreement, and it's like, that's just straight up passing the cost on to the owner, and you wind up going over budget on every one and eating costs there too, right? The other is like, I'm gonna free-con this thing and hope the job converts, and if it does, we're gonna throw that cost on the job. Again, the client's getting hit with that. Or you eat it out of your bottom line, and then you're going to find other ways to make up that cost that you lost as a large organization, builder. So and yet we're not looking at ways of just making that cost exposure go down. Like, maybe we should do that.
Yes, it's increasing overheads for people, right? So essentially, Ediphi should help reduce that overhead.
That's the goal.
That's the goal. And I just one quick bone for the architects. You said maybe they won't like it. The thing is like we're trying to demystify what's in the estimate. The concept of our rooms is a way to actually explain what are the rooms that you have programmed and what are we assuming for the finishes and what's inside of them and the cost per room so you can understand the cost drivers. Oh, the amenity's $2 million. That's why we're so over budget. So at least if we give the design team the transparency, I'd like to believe that they can function better with that improved understanding.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
That's the net result, and that's how it should be. Yeah.
But before we get there, I think we should have a little bit of a lay of the land currently. Dustin, you mentioned something in a previous episode about this notion of cloud-based. So perhaps we could talk about some of the current estimating tools that are on the market and available, and how bad is it?
Well, I mean, look, the current estimating tools, Excel being number one, and then yeah, the four largest ones are WinEst, Beck, Destiny, Sage, Timberline, and probably CostX. They're used by many of the ENR 400. They are not true cloud applications. Some of them market themselves as cloud enabled. What does that really mean? It means you create a virtual desktop to access a remote Citrix. So you're kind of playing in your own cloud, which is really odd because the purpose of the cloud is accessibility anywhere and the interoperability between other applications. But if you're in your own cloud, you're never going to realize that interoperability. Right. So that of the main estimating solutions, those are the incumbents, and they've done a fantastic job of supporting estimating as I have an event, so I need to quantify and extract all the data from the design, and then use that and augment that those quantities with what I think cost will be in order to provide something back. But they're ill-equipped to facilitate the communication in the future, to improve what are the cost drivers, to facilitate cross-team collaboration. There's real issues when you have not cloud-enabled software about getting your whole team on board. Like, how do you even execute or implement on this? We talked to one of our advisors, actually, that there's a blog about it. There's a tri-venture going on where it's three GCs are partnered on $4.5 billion hospital, and I think the costs have escalated quite significantly. They were unable to use, the two of the GCs have different, but one of these cloud applications, or one of these desktop applications, they couldn't all use it because there was no way to deploy it. You would have to stand up your own instance of this non-cloud application. So you couldn't come together in order to build this big project. So they're using Excel spreadsheets. It's not scalable. Yeah. And the bigger the projects, the more these JVs and P3s and some of these other things, some of these unique contract structures are going to occur, and you're going to need cloud applications to do that. And then Mike talks about this a lot. In pre-construction, it's about making decisions based upon information. One of the things the cloud does is allows you to seamlessly share information so that we can get it the people what they need when they need it.
Is it not obvious?
Not in construction and pre-con right now.
You both mentioned Citrix. The last time I worked for a large corporate...
you know what I'm talking about, the VPN login, it's terrible.
Yeah, they had Citrix and I knew it didn't work. It didn't work. And you're still saying that Citrix is being...
Oh, I've had many estimators that have come up to me, like we were at Advancing Pre-con, and they come up to me, can you please get them to rip this out? I can't work from home. It's too slow. Because I have to, not only Citrix, I have to VPN in. And they literally can't estimate from home. They're like, this is not feasible right now. It's just too slow.
But what was the reason for this? There's no other tech?
They just predate the cloud, really. Yeah, they predate that web technology that we all enjoy today. And it's a hard system to pull out of a large organization. It's like pulling out an ERP system, because every dollar of revenue goes through it when you're at scale. So it is hard to pull out that existing tool and put in a new one.
I think the biggest problem with the industry is the tool works.
Yep.
They know how it works.
It ain't broke.
And what he just said, it's hard to rip out. Yep. But the people that are using it on a daily basis aren't necessarily the decision makers. And the decision makers aren't necessarily feeling the impact of this not being cloud native. So there is some disconnect on the severity of this issues and like what the result could be if this was not the case, if people could access it anywhere. And this also enables, like, sometimes you do bring in PMs or PEs from the field or superintendents, look at the estimate, or I'm bringing in my MEP guy who's on a project over here. He's going to come in and look at this. How do you do that if you have to install these desktop applications and stuff?
Yeah, you're siloed within your organization, let alone trying to bring your organizations together.
Or if you're it gets even worse. If you're a multi-regional organization, most of them typically do not have different quote unquote instances of these applications so there is no cross-office collaboration because you'd have to be in a different instance because they have to maintain a different database because it would be too slow to go this Citrix server from server. It's kind of scary.
So I got a question here. So if these companies operate on Citrix environment and everything works to a degree, and suddenly you guys come in with a cloud-based solution, are you not completely flipping their workflow? How are you going to enable them to do the work without disruption of a Citrix kind of environment? Or are you going to replace it completely?
Well, so it really depends on the business, what the right flow would be for. I mean, eventually we'll want to completely rip and replace. But there is ways for us to augment their current situations and them not to have to feel like they have to do it all at once. For example, one company came to us and said, hey, we got an RFP. It's based on just these conceptual designs. They said, we think your software would be perfect for this. And so now they're going to be using us to do these conceptual designs or RFPs because we can do a lot of programmatic estimating that none of these solutions can do. And this is a natural way for them to evolve and then just, okay, we've done our conceptual estimating. Now we got CDs. Okay, why not just continue the estimating process in Ediphi? So I wish there was one way we would be able to onboard every single contractor, but that's part of why this is, it's not easy and everyone couldn't do it. We're trying to assemble a team. We're hiring more estimators to be a part of our team. So we're building up a lot of estimation knowledge so that we can train people on how to effectively use this in any situation.
That's right. One thing I'll say too is that I've noticed is how do you get an organization where maybe there's a CIO that says, look, we've got this perpetual license. We pay a little bit of maintenance per user per year, pretty low cost. And now you want to do a SaaS, recurring annual thing. Like, why? And to convince that person, that was more challenging in the past. Now, it's all about how do we leverage our organization's data. Well, you don't if it's siloed on a desktop, but you do if it's stored in a cloud and we have an API for you to be able to access it and service your needs. So that's been a vector of convincing the more corporate level people that, you're not going to get there in less.
Yeah, I think the most forward-thinking general contractors, that's our primary customer, we do sell to some others, already know that they need to find a cloud solution for pre-construction, for capturing the cost data. And so two of what I believe will be our biggest customers have chosen to say, hey, we're going to do quote unquote a pilot program. It's actually a paid contract but they're going to start estimating projects in Ediphi for people who, in order to make a business case for deploying this and showing it. So it's another path. Like, hey, we don't have to rip and replace everything right now. We can gradually migrate, which I think is going to be the preferred path for everyone. It's, hey, this doesn't have to be super painful, but rather it can be a transition over time.
What about the UX of the current design stack versus what you guys are proposing?
Oh my God.
Well, it's a low bar with the incumbents, but I don't think we're quite at the building connected UX like gold, but we're getting there on ours.
Yeah. Look, is Ediphi or any estimating solution ever going to be the sexiest application out there? Probably not. We're still dealing with a lot of numbers and very number centric, but it can be a whole lot better. And we're bringing in a modern front end framework. We're investing in user experience and the user interface so that people feel like it makes sense. So design is something, and I learned this from my last co-founder, Jesse, that is unbelievably important, and most tech companies actually ignore it. But you can have a true differentiation if you have really great designs. It just makes people like more willing to try you. It gives a sense of credibility when you show the application, especially on demos. And it can be a real competitive advantage. I would say that the incumbents look like you would expect a 2000 software
Yeah, very
to look like.
Windows 95 kind of a vibe. Only works on Windows for all of them.
And it's also not appealing at all to younger estimators coming into the market, perhaps, right?
Yeah, that's it's interesting because I rolled out this software when it was being built internally across the Suffolk as an organization. It was actually the younger people did tend to pick it up, like those career starts on the floor, picked it up quicker,
Yeah, I got some stats here. So the average age of estimator is 46 years old. 67% are 40 plus years old. 24% are between 30 and 40. Only 9% are between 20 and 30 years old.
And this is a big problem for construction, is that the pre-construction landscape is aging rapidly, and there's a layer of tribal knowledge that actually needs to be distributed down. And the estimating tools, I'd say right now, don't do a good job of capturing it, but also like the same way we want to inform design is we want to make it digestible for someone to come in there and understand what's going on. And that's how we do that, is through some of our mechanisms. Like, we allow customers to create what we call an area sheet, which is just basically massing the structure, showing the geometries, showing like what is the floor to floor height, what's the perimeter of the building, gross facade, and then young estimators can do this, and they can start seeing relationally how these geometries affect the overall costs and quantities, even early as a conceptual phase, or how you can do this programmatic mess. It's clearer, and so what that means is you can up-level these estimators more quickly than you would if, say, these other applications where it's not, where it's more not as transparent. So I think that's important, because it takes a couple years really for an estimator to be valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll say this too. Like, when I was pitching to build it internally, the ROI that I was pitching for was 2 metrics: increased revenue per estimator. Get every estimator to do more, right? Because it wasn't about getting less people. It was about, if you want to scale revenue, estimators are hard to come by. It's a tough market, so you need to be able to do more with fewer people. That was one. The other was lower average cost per estimator. And the way you got that was not by paying people less, right? I mean, I was a senior guy. I enjoyed that salary. It's more than in the startup world, but it's true. It's true. So to get younger people part of the process, which makes the average cost per body go down, right? Get more younger people in. And in the incumbents, you'd have to split up the estimate into pieces. Everyone works on them and then merge them in. We're multi-user in that junior person can be working on the area sheet that the senior person is using to assemble their formulas. And you're collaborating, and that knowledge transfer is happening in ways that it wasn't before.
Yeah, I like that, because I could also picture where people coming from university now are learning a different method of estimating versus the guys that are like in their, I don't know, late 50s, 40s, 60s, wherever it might be. And so when they pick up an estimate from an older person, they probably look at it like, what the hell is this? Whereas you guys, sounds like what you're building is something to, that knowledge transfer is quite seamless.
The knowledge transfer is also enabled, like in tech, we try to build out like knowledge repositories. There's software to help companies manage their knowledge database so that they can find out any piece of information. But the problem with having disparate systems, which we currently have in pre-con, is there's no mechanism for, let's say we had a highly motivated first-year estimator to start learning about these things. And with Ediphi, we're trying to capture all the cost data across pre-con. So if I'm a young estimator, I could actually go in there and start looking at, okay, this is how they priced it then, and then. This is how they bought it out. This is how the general conditions and general requirements were built. Like, oh my God, almost always that's on an Excel spreadsheet, and then that's put into some Drive folder, and then you got one line item saying this is my general condition somewhere. Yeah. So it's like, even if you had like an eager junior person who's like, I just want to be a rock star, it would be hard for them to do that.
That's actually super relevant to what you say. I remember when I was a junior, I did structural design, and when we got access to the software straight away, that's what I felt, that I can design anything I want because the software has unlimited capabilities, really, right? As long as you can use it.
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful.
Talking of perhaps on the data piece as well. So the knowledge transfer is facilitated by data. I understand one of the things you guys are really looking at is this perhaps onboarding or taking of people's existing data and putting it into Ediphi's platform to inform future estimates. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is that applicable to everyone? Can anyone come on board the system? And like, is it a matter of plugging in a USB stick and like putting it onto Ediphi? Simple question, probably a complex answer, but.
Okay, so look, here's the thing is that ultimately what we're talking about are line items, right? Ultimately, we exist to generate the cost that becomes a contract, and that cost is a sum of a bunch of line items. Everyone comes at us with their line items, right? That whether they have past estimates or they have their unit cost database, and it's construction scope. A slab is a slab, a window is a window, like, a wall is a wall, yet everyone has their own unique perspective on those things, their own unique classification, sort fields, WBS. And so the challenge for onboarding is to get that into our system in a way that can be aggregated in the future. Because right now the existing systems, they kind of, it's like a afterthought about the aggregation use case. And to that end, I don't know, I guess we could say like we do have a large language model that we use that was open source that we've further tuned to bring in customers' data, to relate it to a global identity like taxonomy of construction scope, so that when it comes in, we can enrich it with all of these master format, uniformat, bid package, additional classifications needed to enrich that data.
Right. I think you're also alluding to how hard is the cold start?
Yeah, it's hard.
Well, I mean, there are some customers though, they're growing, right? And Excel is not a bad tool when you're just getting started in construction, because usually you're the owner estimating. Excel is fine if you are the singular estimating pre-con person, because your Excel spreadsheet. You're not going to break your Excel spreadsheet, and it's totally fine. But as you start growing, you realize you need a process to support multiple people. And in those instances, we can actually provide them a database that they can just start right away. Yeah. And it's the first time that they've had that. And so people are actually paying to actually create that framework for their company so that they can build on, or that foundation so that they can build on that. And so the cold start can be actually quite easy in that we can provide you the infrastructure that you need. But for the other ones that have been around a long time, we can ingest what they're currently using so that they can utilize in Ediphi. But what we're going to do with any customer is go through a configuration process, which can take a long time, but doesn't have to be done all at once. But we want every customer to start thinking about, this is really important, and this is not what any other tool does. People try to create WBS codes. They don't use them consistently around from project to project and region to region, so they're never good at it. But we want to start thinking about, okay, how do you want to normalize projects for historical benchmarking? Yeah. And this will give you the power to compare one project to another. And I'll use the example of a hospital or a medical office building. Sure, you might look at one medical office building to another, and the cost per square foot varies wildly. Why? Because they have different use cases, so different departments in that medical office building that vary the cost. So you need to think about how to structure the data so you're allocating the costs appropriately so that you can benchmark those projects and be able to compare any medical office building based upon what departments they programmed.
Yeah. And that's what Ediphi.
That's what Ediphi does.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have that data aggregation sort of in our DNA from the beginning, and it's a bit of an afterthought in the existing incumbents.
Is the data like crowdsource kind of model whereby
no,
and no, it's like your own individual organization?
I just said no right away because I don't want anyone to be scared of that. No, we're not aggregating anything. Yeah,
separate from other people's data.
Yeah,
that's how people feel about it now, and that's
yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah.
Maybe yes. So I've know of design software. For example, Snapshot, I know that they have automated cost data based on the design. I guess that's to a degree. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. How do you relate to design stack that has estimating tools?
So where are they getting their cost data? So I have never seen an architect that's good at estimating cost. I haven't seen, there's a lot of cost consultants that aren't good at estimating costs. You know who's good at estimating costs? The people that build the projects.
Yeah, it's got to be the people that award the work and execute it. Yeah. And I know Snapshot, and actually I think that they're a great shop and everything. And we actually have some generative design technology that we're not offering yet, but we own the IP rights that's been a passion project of mine. And fundamentally, even if we were to hook up to someone else, like a Hypar or something, those guys are great. But Anthony, right? And those guys were, and Ian too, right? Was part of Dynamo over at Autodesk. And, that was an inspiring thing when I started playing around with that tool for me. But you need the estimating to have a paradigm that can receive those design concepts in that generated design world. And line items isn't it. It's too flat. WBS structures aren't enough. That's why you do need an area sheet. You need to be able to receive the floors and their perimeters and their areas, and you need that information. You need rooms. You need, the idea of units like apartments or guest rooms or classrooms or patient rooms.
But that's why I think tools like these, thinking about cost, is really good, but they're not going to be the source of truth of cost, right? Like, this is why tools like Ediphi should be able to receive design concepts. Likewise, they should be able to receive cost associated with those design concepts, because we talked about how we want design and estimating to actually happen in parallel, so that if one changes, the other's changed. And those sort of relationships can make a better ecosystem.
So you're thinking perhaps in the future merging with some sort of design?
I'm thinking it's more like an integration.
Integration.
Yeah. And here's the thing, generative design, which again, I'm very passionate about. I don't think that's what this talk is about, but it's going to be nascent until the cost can be tied into it. And I'm not just talking about, put it in a price per square foot. It has to be tied into the next step of the process, which is to get the job into the estimated, agreed on price, contracted, awarded, break ground. And until that's done, gen design is going to be on the ground.
Maybe actually Ediphi becomes a design tool.
Dude, we've got some technology there. I've been on stage with Anthony.
Species to what you were saying earlier.
Yeah. I mean, the idea of a design tool is like, but how deep? How deep do you want to go?
I don't think you want to replace.
We have so many things we want to do on the build side, like the construct or pre-con side, that it's like a far distant future. Yeah. But having the concepts that inform the design as part of Ediphi, like what are the geometries as we're programming rooms? What are the geometries of the rooms? Things like this is important.
Yeah, I think our research and actual, demonstratable product in the generative design space, like I said, I've been on stage with Anthony of Hypar when we were in New York at Time Center a couple of years ago showing our products off in that space. At least we're not offering that, but we have an estimating solution that knows what that is and can receive it. Like I said to you, Revit models take too long to create. I want design and estimating to happen in parallel, and they can only happen in parallel if those kind of solutions speak in the future. I think we're set up to do that.
Very good. Most general contractors then claim to have good cost or pricing databases. Do you think this is true? Do you agree?
No. No. And actually, I think if you talk to them, they realize their cost database is out of date, at least at like the unit cost level, and then maybe their line items also need to be cleaned up. I think that it's kind of the same problem that Building Connected was trying to solve. And so Ediphi has some unique ways. In fact, they're similar to what Building Connected was trying to solve. That's my old company if you're just watching this podcast. Maintaining a unit price catalog of, these catalogs can be 10,000 line items, and keeping the cost up to date, the unit cost for each line item up to date, is not a realistic.
Is it in Excel or is it somewhere?
Whether it's in their application or Excel, it's not realistic.
Is it connected somehow to the outside world that it's automatically being?
No, this is a manual updating process. And so I think when you talk to them deep down, they're like, no, that's not up to date. And we have some things, there is still some onus on them. I think this is where, as you are pricing more things, we do allow the estimating team to sort of crowdsource when to update it. Yeah. But I think that, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say right now where we're at with that is the tooling to help people make judgment calls. Because the thing is, if you look at the factors of a drywall partition, right? Well, you can say, oh, well, where it's located, and if it's union or non-union, or what year was it? But there's so many other factors. What if it's on the 60th floor? What if it's on the first floor? What if it's a difficult logistics site to get on? What if you have to load the building at night on overtime? Like, there's too many factors to have all those factors baked in. You need to empower the people you pay lots of money to be able to make judgment calls. So one just quick example of a tool to help on that. If you bring in a line item on our platform, you can right click on it and see what everyone else thought that was worth on their project within that context, and how many square feet and when was it and who did it, right? It's that sort of crowdsourcing that Dustin was just talking about that become the tools that empower people to be better at making judgment calls.
Yeah, because there is not one unit cost. There's the unit cost for that project. There's one cost for that project. Yeah. But the unit cost is going to vary depending on the project. And so seeing people's perspective from one project to another, it can help people make the judgment call.
Exactly. And it's a few steps better than going down the hall and asking Joe, right? Because you can see everything. Now, of course, the tools will get better from there, but we're starting to give the tools that help people make those calls.
Funny anecdote, but how some like subcontractors or trade contractors, as you call, come up with their rates is they literally speak to each other. It's like, how much are you charging to install the drywall? It's like £30. All right, I'm going to tell my client 50. There's not like a real science behind it. It's just like the word is going around. The whispers between the communities that are building up these costs are like, this is how we do it. And so you can't actually keep on top of that data unless you are actively out there speaking to these people.
You have to be actively out there. And then there's
contracting,
there's price spikes to markets, right? Like all of a sudden a commodity comes up, like
supply chains problem.
Yeah.
Steel in 2020. I mean,
Yeah.
Curtain wall.
Predict that.
It was crazy. Well, I'll say one quick thing too about that too when you're talking about how they talk. The problem is ultimately what it comes down to is the bottom line number. Concrete guy A, concrete guy B, bottom line number. How they come up with this guy's slab is worth some amount, this guy's slab is worth another. Maybe the money's in the rebar. Maybe the money's here. Maybe they put it in all sorts of different places. It's the bottom line where they line up on, not in the unit prices necessarily.
What type of products are you current estimating stack is designed for, and what do you cater for?
I think you're going to get the most value out of Ediphi if you're a commercial builder. So we're talking data centers, healthcare, labs, schools, apartment, hotels, hospitality. So in the commercial context, we haven't been focused on sort of civil or infrastructure. Airports would be another one, but so those are where we're tailored. Usually because they're more complex, they have a longer pre-construction process, so there's more value to be gained. We do support customers that deal with the hard bid situation. I think though, if you're generally just plans and specs, then you'll realize less value.
Is it? I can picture two scenarios, right? And this is definitely how it works in the UK. But at the very early stage, it's usually the employer or the owner, which is like or the cost consultant doing the work. But when it gets to the stage of when people are putting in their bids, then it switches to the general contractor or the contractors who are actually putting their prices in to do the work. So is Ediphi working with the cost consultants in the earlier phase of the project and then transitioning through to the general contractors?
So it's a little different here than in the UK. So you guys have a lot more cost consultant work done earlier on. You have the quantity surveyor specialists that are providing the quantity. So it's definitely different here. The GCs do all of the early cost estimation, except for the very big projects. Then they'll bring on the cost consultants very early on. But still, the GC is there, and sometimes they're working hand in fist with those cost consultants. So typically, we are working with just the general contractors. But we are starting to partner with a lot of CM for a lot of the CM stuff.
And we have a cost consultant client as well. I'll say, like, as far as my history on projects, and I've worked on many. Most of them I was not with a cost consultant. Typically, the cost consultant ones, like the casino, had a cost consultant. It was, $1.5 billion. So, but the universities, the hospitals, they'll typically have cost consultants. But it's like you price in parallel, and then you reconcile. It's like a check on the contractor's number. But it's not like cost consultant does this, then we do that. No, we're in America. We're from the beginning.
Yeah, so the customer really is just general contractors, at least whilst you're in the US.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Maybe a little bit, I don't know, it's slightly different flavor to this next question, but when you're doing estimating, what do you think is more important, the quantity takeoffs or the pricing?
I mean, I have to go. We're going to have the same opinion.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, what makes a deal go is the bottom line number. So the numbers are what matters the most. How you get there is sort of like what I said with concrete guy A and concrete guy B. Like, you'll look at, well, how much rebar money they have versus another, and you can't, it's hard to line them up there. It's the bottom line number that matters. And so quantity takeoff matters less. It's the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, at the end of the day, you're not signing up, well, at least in the US, you're not signing up based upon, you own the entire project. And so whatever was in the drawings, whatever the quantities are, you own them. And so you signed up for whatever the quantity is for this cost. So the cost is more important.
Yeah, we don't really contract off unit rate, unit costs here. We contract on bottom lines. And so because of that, it's less about, like, you own it. You own the quantity. If you get the quantity wrong, it's on you. You own it, right?
But the quantity actually didn't matter whether it was 1,000 or one. You signed a cost, not for a quantity.
Yeah. But also from the tools point of view, it is easier to assess the correct quantity, what is in the drawings, than to, I guess, get the right and up-to-date data on the pricing. Would that be correct, or?
So the up-to-date, the good thing about taking quantities off drawings is it's usually objective, right? The unit cost is usually subjective, right? So that's the interesting kind of dichotomy of it, is the quantities and the unit cost can be subjective because you go to the market and you get different costs back from subcontractors on what it takes to build. So clearly there's different opinions.
Well, the other thing too is that we're kind of in the old paradigm thinking that the quantities are there because the design's there, but the reality is the design's not there and the quantities aren't there. So the value of a highly paid estimator is actually in knowing what is missing and filling in the blanks, though the quantities don't yet exist. That's the value add, and they don't have the tools yet, I think, until us to make that easier.
Yeah, pricing's easy if you had 100% construction documents that had no problems at all, then yeah, you're just pulling off quantities, you're adding on some GCs and fees, and then you're good. But that's not the world we live in and never will be.
Yeah, I like your point, Mike, on the unseens. Do you agree with the statement that if you price the job accurately, you're always going to be too expensive and never win the project?
Yeah, it's like you win work by having holes in your scope. Yeah, there's a little truth to that. Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, I like there to be transparency in it, and you decide where you want to give your edges. I think that, in a world where you miss scope and you win the work is a world where there's a lot of mystery and sort of what's in the number. Oh, I got concrete at, $50 a square foot. What does that mean? It's money. It means money. It's like I'd much rather have tools that make you able to actually say how many cubic yards you have, what is the pounds of rebar, and it might be on metrics. Oh, it's 150 pounds per cubic yard of rebar inside that, footing. I'd prefer those kind of things because they're auditable, measurable, and you can look at, oh, my past job, it was 175 pounds per square foot. This job, it's, and that starts to demystify, and you can decide where you want to get an edge versus winning because you just forgot something.
Yeah. Plus it does promote trust, right, within the industry as well. If you're pricing things accurately and you're not trying to scrimp and scrape to make your money back.
Well, I mean, this brings on an important point. Like, why should you pay for Ediphi relative to some other tools? So one of the reasons is if you're a relationship-based contractor, you want to create more trust with your client, right? And so you want to be able to tell them all the ways, because you tell them what it costs many times across many different milestones of the design phase, but you also want to tell them why the cost changed.
Yeah.
And sometimes those are difficult stories to tell because you got issued a new set of drawings and you're like, okay, well, what's the variance between one another? I think we do a really good job of helping you tell that story of from your previous milestone to your next milestone. What are the actual variances? Did a quantity change on something? Did you change a unit cost? Was this a value engineering? Or did the designer change the details? This is completely unexpected, right? And so I think if you want to build a strong relationship with a client, you should want to tell the client a strong story of pre-con that they believe and understand, because that'll create trust and that'll be someone that they want to do business with again and again. So I think that that's really important.
I think estimating is ultimately telling stories.
Exactly.
It really is. That's what it comes down to. And
Pre-con is telling stories.
I guess that's true. Yeah, pre-con is telling stories. And that's where, like, I think in the other episode we talked about predictability was a big thing. Transparency is the other one. So if you have the predictability and the transparency, then you're going to have the trust and you're going to be able to manage those expectations. And that's being able to tell the story of why numbers changed.
Since we're talking about competition and kind of the problem with cloud versus desktop application, let me tell you about a problem that we solve that exists across construction. A lot of clients want you to fill out an owner bid form. These can be quite complicated. Like if you're dealing with a multi-billion-dollar data center for one of the major tech companies, they have a standardized way they want to consume how each cost is sent to them. And it's not the way you estimate or you think about construction. It's the way they think about real estate, which is different. And so you do all of your estimating, and now you have to manually fill out the client bid form.
Using factors, right? Times 1.3.
Well,
No, it's black magic
It's
in
black
Excel.
magic.
It's this plus that minus this and that, all in cells within. Yeah.
so it's tedious. It's time consuming. And, so Ediphi, we looked at this problem and realized, well, we can actually simplify this process. And so we released an Ediphi, we released in the Microsoft App Store an Ediphi plugin for Excel so that the client bid form can be pre-mapped to everything you're doing in Ediphi. So that you're changing something in Ediphi, it's mapping into the client proposal form. So that you make changes, you don't have to go recalculate every single cell and make sure that it pencils out. It also helps you, what is it looking like in the client's perspective because of that black magic? You kind of want to make sure that you have the cost in the right bucket. Yeah. And so you might want to change something in your estimate so that it appears different in the client's bid form. And you're not going to spend days and days scratching your head, did I add this up correctly? Like, is it looking right? So that was the advantage of being a cloud application, though. It enabled us to send the data to the Microsoft App Store, create a plugin that you sign on with Ediphi. Now you have access to your Ediphi data in your Excel online, which we think is cool.
I think this is underestimated because when you speak in the client's language, there's probably a factor in them deciding whether they want to use you for a project as well, right? If you've got one company that's like, it's in your form nicely and we can explain this, they're going to be like, yeah, I trust you guys. Where you've got another company like, oh, maybe it's here and some of it's there and I don't quite understand your question there, but it's there. It causes confusion.
I wanted to ask, do you guys agree that technology is deflationary and cost of new software should be less than incumbent solutions? And how does it relate to Ediphi?
So technology should be deflationary. And it's deflationary in either it's making a company more efficient so they can essentially do more with less. Or this still ends up being deflationary in a market is that initially they help customers start winning more work. So there's two ways that you create value for your customers: efficiency or increase top line. So increase the bottom line through efficiency or increase the top line, which then increases the bottom line. And then in a market where that efficiency gain has been saturated, then all of a sudden you start seeing people competing again on price, and it should push the landscape down. It's really hard to measure if that actually transpires because you have so many other inputs that, create inflationary causes to the overall construction, but it should be deflationary.
Well, it's like what I said earlier, where the ROI for Suffolk anyways was the more revenue per estimator and lower average cost per estimator, right? And that is something from day one to get the budget I pitched, and so I had to measure against that. And I think that we, by and large, right, with the
Well, his quote is what, 25% more revenue per estimator?
yeah, and then
The director of pre-construction at Suffolk Construction, his analysis came back with his team's able to do 25% more revenue per estimator in their pre-construction deposits.
1/4, that's a lot.
yeah, so it's deflationary in that the estimating cost per project is coming down.
Okay, so the cost of the software would be more expensive, for example, but the output would be significantly much better.
When we're talking billions of dollars, and the projected fee on every billion is 3%, so 300 million. You don't care if you can get 25% more productivity out of your pre-con team that wins the work. That's
Absolutely. And how do you what's the cost basis of someone that's an Excel shop? I mean, or someone that's just got a perpetual license on an old software that they're just paying maintenance every year. So there may be some increase on what they're paying on us, but it's the benefit they get, like Dustin was saying, on the productivity.
Okay, one last question from me would be, we talked about pre-construction estimating, and maybe we touched upon the future of whether Ediphi becomes a design tool, but is the plan just to focus on estimating, or is it to expand into a wider suite?
So we want to become the pre-construction platform so that we are the source of truth for what a project costs at any given point in time, all the way until you sign a GMP. There is a lot of inputs in that we either need to build those things or integrate with those solutions to get data in. Some mechanisms might be interacting with design software, might be interacting with these new 2D takeoff tools or 3D quantification. They could be integrating with ERPs or workforce planning systems. We also need to understand the contracting. So you estimate a project, but what does the market buy it at? So we support you doing your bid evaluation, but we also support you creating your scope sheets, which then you want to and maybe integrate with your bid solicitation software so that subcontractors know how you're going to view it. But also, and so when you get those proposals back, you're not inputting information as well. So there's a lot of stuff to do to create a pre-construction solution so that all the data, you have one source of truth, which no one has in pre-con right now. We want to be that single source of truth. So we're going to do what it takes to make that happen.
Yeah. If we don't build it, we're going to integrate with it, or maybe someday buy it.
And what's the market in the US for it? How many potential contractors, general contractors?
Well, I think you would think about, if you build a pre-construction platform, what's the addressable market, right? Procore has built a publicly traded company on a project management solution. I think that you can easily make a case, and this is from a top-down or a 50,000 foot sort of perspective, that pre-con is more important, so you should be able to build a larger company on that. If we're really good at our job, eventually we will help customers generate revenue, which you can charge more for than you can an efficiency tool, which is what project management's about. In order to do a bottoms-up approach, you'd have to look at each aspect of solutions we're providing and do some crazy analysis, because we do cost modeling, which is sold independently. We do estimating, which is totally another solution. We do general conditions, general requirements. What's that worth? We do contracting and all these other things. So you'd have to add up the sum of all parts and then discount it because you're bulking it together.
It's not worth the energy.
Yeah, it's not worth the energy.
Well, you can imagine if you think about the estimating activity, pre-construction activity for any builder, they are going to work on many more projects than they build. So our throughput of dollars and projects is going to be greater than the build software that's out there.
Any more from you?
No? You want to tease for the next one?
I'll tease the next one. Okay, thanks guys. So I think in that one we took quite a high level approach, but in the next episode we'll be diving more into the granular detail, what the features of Ediphi are and the business model, and why Ediphi is the preeminent tool within the pre-construction space.
Yeah, I'd say too, just to double down on what I think is unique about us, is there are cost modeling tools out there, and maybe they have great features. The problem is you can't get the data in. It's really, really hard to get the data in. With us, you can benchmark any estimate with a click. And so harvesting your historical data is the pain point that we solve for. I'm gonna put a little emotion into this because, like, as an estimator, like, and I had a Friday deadline and it was due at 5, and I was stretching the definition of end of day to mean midnight, and the cleaning lady has come and gone and given me the dirty looks, and I'm still at my desk, and I'm just trying to make sure this number's right because my ass is on the line. Like, this number's got to be right. Now I got to submit it to the client, except I got to fill out their form, and it's going to take me 3 hours, and I'm like, it's miserable, right? And you have to rinse and repeat this like every time. So, you know, for some of the older estimators that go, I don't give a crap about the cloud because I just want to retire in 2 years. Well, this is something for you, right? This is something that's going to let you go to your grandson's baseball game on a Friday instead of being, you know, saying bye to the cleaning lady.